Well, first of all, so glad that all of you guys are here. And Premier Burt, I haven't seen you in several years. So good to see you, and the entire Bermuda team that is here. I recall the first time I met the Premier was back in 2018 in New York at a UNGA Blockchain Central session we had with Concordia. And you had just come into office pretty much the year before. And to meet a world leader who's also a technologist was just mind blown. And we were expecting great things to come out of Premier Burt's agenda and Bermuda, and we're going to talk a bit about that. It was great to meet you then. It's great to see you again. Let's talk a little bit about Buidl, Bermuda. What does that really mean, and why does that fit for Bermuda?
Well, Sandra, it's good to see you again, and it's good to certainly be back here at Consensus. When you talk about 4 years ago, I remember I spoke at Consensus in May 2018 in New York, and at that point in time, it was the week that we were introducing our Digital Asset Business Act, which was one of the first licensing regimes for crypto companies on the planet. And now, 4 years later, to look where we are, to see what the stuff of which we've done. But I think what's important about the moniker, it's about building, you know. We have to build, and it's about making sure that you have an infrastructure, a regulatory environment in place that allows companies to build. What we've seen in a lot of jurisdictions is not regulatory clarity, difficulty in actually building, running into problems. And so from our perspective, we want to focus on building. So we started this journey in 2018. You know, it's been a little bit of rough waters, some missteps. But as a politician, you sometimes want to see the instant results. But the instant results don't happen. And that's why you have to build, iterate, and that's the way we're going.
Well, appreciate that, you know, there have been some rough seas or waters, very appropriate again, along the way. But I want to talk about one area where you guys have really excelled, which is not only the regulatory framework, but the licensing regime that you've put in place. Can you talk a little bit about the different types of licensing that now a bunch of crypto companies are holding? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I just want to make sure I give a shout out to my team from the Bermuda Monetary Authority. They'll be upset that I'm pointing them out, but Moad and AXA are right there. They are the ones who are responsible for any crypto licensing in Bermuda. Chance, you know them well. But yes, they're right there. Put up your hands, Moad.
Hold up your hands, guys. Woo!
Don't be afraid.
Bermuda Monetary Authority.
Don't be afraid, but we would not have anything if it was not for our regulators. So
Go regulators. This might be the only session where we do that, okay?
Our regulators are nice. We like them. But we do have a three-tiered regime, which is essential to Buidl, because you have to be able to understand what it is that you're building. And it's hard sometimes looking at this regulated environment and figuring out what it is that you're going to do. So when we started, actually, we had a modified license or a sandbox license and a full license. And in 2020, we added another license tier, which was a test license. So a test license allows you to test out, you know, what your approach may be and interact with the regulator to say, these are the type of things you wish to do. The license is only $1,000, so you can actually have interaction with the regulator. Then the next level is a modified license or a sandbox license, which allows you to start testing publicly, start with a limited number of customers for a limited duration. So Moad and AXA might let you have 1,000 customers and to let you go at that level. And then once you graduate from there, test all the various things, make sure that your compliance is in check, make sure that you're appropriately managing all the risks so something will not, negatively impact the reputation of our regulator in our country, but also impact your customers. Then we go to a full license, and that full license is that you have no restrictions on your activity. Bermuda now has 7 full licensees. Our latest full license was issued last week to a company called Buidl, which is also a banking license, but we might get there in a little bit. But those are companies such as, I would say, Circle and BlockFi, who are doing yield products regulated under the Bermuda Monetary Authority. Companies like Bitrex, who are doing tokenized stocks and derivatives under the auspices of the Bermuda Monetary Authority. We have those ones that are in the sandbox, which are going to be graduating hopefully sometime to a full license, companies like Stable House and XPTO. And then we have companies that are in test licenses who are just getting started, who are experimenting. But this is the entire regime, and it allows you to Buidl.
Absolutely. So you've got double-digit, 16, 17 licensees now in various parts of the life cycle of getting to full licensing, and that's all under the authority of, and oversight of the Bermuda Monetary Authority.
Absolutely. Just for full disclosure, the elected government has nothing to do with licensing, so I cannot help you. You got to talk to them.
You can try to call him, but he ain't helping you with the licensing. That's great. Good to hear. Well, let's also talk about, so on the crypto side, we have a very healthy pipeline of people who are getting, and companies who are getting licensed. On the insurance side, you also have a very strong, established background anyway. Can you talk a little bit about that for those who are not as familiar on the insurance side?
Absolutely. Bermuda is the world's risk capital. We are the home to some of the largest insurers on the planet. We have done insurance, and it kind of fits into the way in which we're trying to go when it comes to digital assets, because every major insurance innovation over the last 40 years has taken place out of the Bermuda market. And so when we're talking about catastrophe bonds, when we're talking about insurance-linked securities, when we even talk about captive insurance, all the types of things that are pioneering in insurance have come out of the Bermuda market. And the whole premise there is that we have a unique relationship between, I used to call it the Bermuda Trinity. It was upsetting some persons, so we've now rebranded to the Bermuda Triangle. But it is the link between our regulator, the government, and industry. And what that allows us to do is to have feedback from the regulator, from industry, feedback from the industry, which are typically governed or relayed to the government through legal representatives. I just want to give a shout out to the team from Walkers, who are doing a great job in bringing companies to Bermuda. That feedback then goes to our us in the government. We will analyze it, speak to the regulator. The regulator will either say this is okay or no, we need to consult on this. They'll put it out to the market to get feedback and comments. It will come back to us. They'll say this is good to go. They'll send us a draft bill. We'll take it to Parliament and go ahead and pass it. And this happens on a relatively quick basis over and over and over again. So we start in 2018. We update our Digital Asset Business Act about once every year, possibly, to make sure we take into account, to make sure we're staying on the cutting edge.
Okay, just take a moment, guys. He just talked about an updating of and review of any sort of legislation they've put forth every year to make sure they are current.
Yes.
What other government in the world has a process that even gets us to a 1 year of review of anything? That's extraordinary.
And
amazing.
The best thing about it, Sandra, is that it doesn't even require my involvement. I remember I was stunned when all of a sudden I got a cabinet paper, which is what we get to consider changes once a week, and I got a cabinet paper where they were upgrading the Digital Asset Business Act to add clarity for derivatives. And the first time I had actually seen it was when it had come to me to sign off on the cabinet agenda. And so when we speak about that, we focus on the Digital Asset Business Act, but we also have insurers there. So Realm is in Bermuda, the largest crypto insurer on the planet. I had a meeting with them earlier today. They now even have 30 people worldwide, 13 people in the Bermuda office, growing and providing services. But we have 7 insurers that are also licensed providing services. And what is important to note that in Bermuda, with our crypto insurers, such as Realm, and with the work of the Bermuda Monetary Authority, those persons can write policies in digital assets, not just one-to-one stablecoins, but they can write policies in Bitcoin, hold the reserves in digital assets, pay premiums in digital assets, and pay out, of course, when you have a claim. So all that is happening in Bermuda, and so there's a digital asset side, and the insurance side is critical because it's necessary for growth in the industry, and that's how you build.
I am so glad that the Premier has said that. We do not talk about the insurance side enough, especially in the crypto space. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to get crypto insurance, but I did back in 2016 when I was still over at CMU Group, and I'll tell you, I mean, the industry was nowhere. I mean, they didn't know how to even start looking at the risk. Today, we are much further along, but we need to keep growing that side of the industry, and there needs to be more companies innovating in this space. So I think we're going to get there. Bermuda's going to get us there. But it's good to hear that you've got at least 7 licensees that are growing that pipeline.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've already talked about licensing, and I think another area where I think you guys have done a great job is really around this sort of coming up with the entire pipeline. So you have a sandbox, you have an innovation hub, you have an office of fintech.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about all those pieces? Like, let's say I'm an entrepreneur here. I want to go and talk to somebody because I want to set up shop in Bermuda. How do I do it?
Well, you will go to our Bermuda Business Development Agency, or you can go to the website fintech.bm or bda.bm, and certainly there we will introduce you to some of our legal representatives or accounting representatives to walk you through the process. One of the things you did mention was our innovation hub, because sometimes you may not know what you want to do, or you may not be appropriate to be licensed. It might not be something you want to be licensed. So I think Alpha Point is in our innovation hub, and what that allows to do is to make sure that you are a part of the Bermuda Monetary Authority's fintech, and you get, so for instance, you'll get certain consultation papers, et cetera, but it'll also allow you to have access to the companies that are inside the ecosystem if you may have goods and products and services you may wish to give to them. We do have the Office of Fintech that does fall under myself. It's led by my good friend Dennis Pitcher, as you will be aware, and he's been working with me for about since 2019. And what that has done is it's making sure that it lays out the strategy for the country. And so we'll get to some of the things, I'm sure, when talking about what we're doing when it comes to stablecoins, what we're doing about digital identity. But what Bermuda is not trying to do is not trying to be all things to all people. We're not trying to be prescriptive. We are trying to say, this is what we have. You can come to Bermuda and Buidl, and you can do what you want to do as long as it complies with, as long as you're managing the risks to make sure that you can actually build a global company in the digital asset space from Bermuda.
Fantastic. So you mentioned stablecoins, so we're going to go there. You've had some very specific views about CBDCs versus stablecoins and private sector stablecoins. Please tell us, what is the stance from Bermuda side on CBDC?
The stance from us and from the Bermuda side is that we will not be issuing a CBDC because we do not believe that a CBDC needs to be issued by a government. Oh, you got
some fans here.
That's not necessary, because the future is going to be interoperability of stablecoins, and what we want to do is to make sure that any stablecoin which is issued under the auspices of the Bermuda Monetary Authority has assessed the risk. Now, we're only dealing with one-to-one stablecoins. We're not trying to go into controversy today, so I'm sure there's been plenty of conversation, discussions about that. But as we talk about new companies that were licensed, Jewel Bank, which is represented by, I think Chance is here. Jewel Bank just got—
Congratulations. How many years ago was the last time you issued a bank license?
21 years Bermuda has not issued a banking license.
That's called making history.
Yes,
all right.
Absolutely. And of course, they have the permission from the Bermuda Monetary Authority to issue stable coins, and they are applying to the Bermuda Monetary Authority to issue a one-to-one Bermuda dollar stable coin. But we believe that should be done through the private sector, because we do not think that the government needs to be there. There's going to be interoperability. And as long as the government is regulating those activities, any regulated stablecoin that is regulated by the Bermuda Monetary Authority is freely for use inside of our ecosystem, inside of Bermuda. It is free for use for payment and services to the government of Bermuda. That is the approach which we want to take. We want, going back to Buidl, it's important. The private sector is far better at doing things than the government of Bermuda in this space. And if you want to have innovation, you do not want to have it from the public sector side. You want the private sector to go ahead and to innovate.
So you are really advocating for that public-private sector collaboration to come up with the best solution.
Absolutely. And the market will decide. The market will tell whether things work or whether they don't work. But It's not our place to choose, pick winners or losers. What if the government of Bermuda were to, select, build a CBDC on this platform, and then, in 2 years that platform doesn't exist? It's for the private sector to go ahead and to make sure, and the market will respond.
So along that same vein, we're going to go to digital identity, because you also have a very different view than some around what government issues. Some will say that they issue identity, but you've definitely have said that governments don't issue identity. I would agree with that. You don't issue identity. But speak a little bit about your plans on digital identity versus self-sovereign or private identity.
Thank you, Sandra. Well, when it comes to digital identity, this is something that we had prefaced. I think I actually spoke about it at a GBBC event in 2019 at the World Economic Forum. Certainly, I remember that. And we are looking at identity not as a technology problem, but looking at it as a regulatory problem. And when I say a regulatory problem, there are countless persons who issue some form of identity. And what we want to do is to mirror that process in the real world process in technology. And that does not mean that the government should issue identity. Right now, if you go to a lawyer, for instance, and they're a notary public and they sign off on something, they have the recognition that this is someone who is trusted to issue this, and this is something that another person or another organization can use. So what the Bermuda Monetary Authority has done is that we've come up with a draft digital identity issuance consultation paper. Okay. And what it is, it's for a digital, sorry, I'm going to get it right now, digital identity service provider. And so what we're looking at doing is licensing digital identity service providers. And not to, is there anyone in the audience who has anything to do with digital identity? Anyone at all? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Quite a few.
7. All right.
Awesome.
Moad and AXA right there. They're welcome and they're looking for feedback, because one of the things we want to
do... regretting being in this room right now.
but
all digital identity people, go over to her.
I say that because the way in which we build our legislation is based upon industry feedback. And though we have the rough outlines, what we want to make sure is what we put out is responsive to industry. Because we certainly believe that identity is a key factor when you talk about insurance, when you talk about regulation, risk. Identity is also important because Bermuda, as an international financial center, has specific requirements when it comes to AML, KYC, all of those items. And when you scale up, that can be incredibly difficult. But if we have a technology base that does make that a lot more efficient, we can see even faster growth inside of the industry. And so our perspective is to issue a digital identity service provider license where you are trusted, where we know what it is. And so each individual person will, companies can issue certain identities that can tie through together, or a certain let me make sure I get the right word, can make sure they issue certain credentials, and that, of course, forms your entire identity. And we want to get to the place where, you're not just going, log on with Facebook, you're signing on with your wallet, because that's where it is. So you can access government services, where you can access private sector services, all through your wallet.
So if you get this right, you guys could be the ultimate litmus test for how this should work, so that all of us could eventually have what I think many of us in this room would like to see, which is identity not being thrust upon us necessarily, but one where we have control as an individual, but yet we still have credentialing, meaning there are lots of different types of trusted bodies, academic, government, whatever have you, who add to our persona and give us that credibility and or whatever, credentialing that we need.
Absolutely. Great. You're 100% correct, because it is not something that is for the government. It is something that exists all the way. So, the government issues driver's license. It is accepted identity by the government, but it is not your identity. And so from that perspective, that is certainly the road we want to take, but it's not for us. It is for companies that are inside of this space to go ahead and to continue to issue those
So right now, you are in consultation mode.
Yes.
I'm hoping a year from now, we're going to hear that there is a pilot or something concrete happening.
Absolutely.
It'd be great.
But in order for that to happen, feedback. And so that's why I want to make sure that feedback is given. And if you don't harass Moad or AXA after this, you can always harass me to say that you want to learn more about it, because we are certainly wanting to make sure that we live up to our name of Buidl Island.
Awesome. How many world leaders tell you in a room, please come harass me? They don't. Premier, you're in a league on your own. Awesome. Let's talk about not only recent things that have happened, which is bank licensing with Jewel Bank, and you've had that great article in the Wall Street Journal. For those who haven't read it, try to get a copy of it. If you're not a subscriber, you can figure it out. What's next? When I think about 2 years of COVID, it's been very difficult. The Bermudan citizens, when I think about how they're benefiting from all of this. What are some of the ways that Bermudan citizens are really going to benefit, and how do you see that roadmap besides the digital identity stuff? How is this going to help not only the citizens, but then also the world as you are evolving all of this?
Well, certainly. Now we have, I will call it, a critical mass of licensed companies in Bermuda. And before it was very difficult. We were driving things from the government perspective, but now the industry is maturing. And today, one of the things I'd certainly like to announce is that we certainly have a new industry association that's formed in Bermuda that's launched today. It's called Next. It's certainly represented here today. Who's from Next, Susan?
Who is from Next Bermuda?
Oh, there they are right there, from Next Bermuda. And what they are...
Go bug them if you want to do business in Bermuda. There you go, right there.
And that's kind of a milestone for us because we have insurance trade associations, we have others, but now we have digital asset. And what they are not going to necessarily do is to push for regulatory changes, because from that aspect we already have a process that works.
Yep.
But it's about making sure the ecosystem works, about making sure that there are more companies that are there, making sure there's the talent that is there, which
Yep.
is necessary for this industry to succeed. And so from that perspective, it's also about driving adoption locally. And that's a key point, because it doesn't matter if you have all these great things. If your citizens do not see the benefit
Yes.
of what it is that you're doing, then all you will have is a politician on TV and people like, well, this doesn't matter to me. This just matters to all those, rich crypto people that are running around. It doesn't matter to us in our everyday lives. And so what we want to make sure to do through stablecoins, because we talked earlier about interoperability of stablecoins, the way in which we wish to go, we want to be the global home for stablecoins. We want to be that place where private sector stablecoins can be issued under regulatory environment and to be used interoperably. And if that happens on the ground, the changes of which our citizens will see
Right.
will be great and immense, from businesses paying less money, certainly on their transactions, less rent extraction, which is being taken by banks, from different access for cheaper services, less expensive, certainly. And so that's what we want to make sure to see. So we're running various pilots. One of our companies, Stable House, has run a pilot where another company that was in Bermuda that was running a pilot, which is called Buidl, where they actually run a pilot with Gosling's rum, where they were issuing some coins so you can go ahead and get some rum for stable coins. This is true. This is what we do in Bermuda. We have fun too, by the way. Just so you're aware. If I should ask, who in this room who's not from Bermuda has been to Bermuda? All right.
few,
Yeah, I like
look.
that. There's quite a few hands up.
Quite a
Okay,
few.
that's good. Come back. It's lots of fun. We have a tech summit, which is taking place. David, remind me of the dates of the tech summit. October 26th to 28th? Oh, look at that. I got it right. October 26th to 28th. But we have fun in our country while we Buidl.
Awesome. And just because you've announced this association today, Next, who can join? Anybody from abroad, locally only?
Mm-hmm.
Who can join?
Well, that's a great question. Who can join? Yes. Any licensed Bermuda
So
company.
this is an industry
Yes.
association.
Absolutely.
Great.
So you have to be
All
a
right.
licensed company in order to join. So get your test license, and then you can join.
All right. Well, there you go. Now you know the path forward on that. So let's talk about now what you said around what you're going to do for Bermudan citizens, but also how have you thought about the collaborations with neighbors? I mean, the U.S., obviously, there's been a lot of discussion around whether there's going to be clarity on regulation at multiple different levels. That one's a tough one, but you've got other neighbors kind of nearby. How do you look at that sort of collaboration or discussion? Do you have plans for more dialogue, at least on information sharing? Because there's a lot of countries who could learn from Bermuda.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of countries who have copied Bermuda's legislation.
There you go.
That's not a problem. We're okay, because this is not just about Bermuda. I mean, the fact is that distributed ledger technologies is going to change the way the world works. It's going to change the store of value. It is going to represent fundamental change in so many different places. It is not for us to try to hold and hog that for ourselves. It goes against the ethos of what I think the movement of what some people consider Bitcoin a movement. It's an ethos from our perspective. So what we want to do is to model how you do this well and how you do it right. If there are more countries that are doing this well, that are doing this right, that will only lead for more growth, more adoption, and better results and outcomes for consumers. Whereas in certain cases and instances, we've seen bad outcomes for consumers.
Right.
And what we want to do is to make sure that's avoided. And so we'll see the regulatory scrutiny which will come. I don't necessarily believe that regulatory scrutiny is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because you do not want people hurt. You don't want people lose their life savings. You don't want people subjected to scams and schemes, et cetera. And so I think that's why it's important. So for us, we share. We've been on the road. We've spoken in CARICOM. We've hosted things and share with CARICOM. We've certainly been over to the OECD to present there. We've presented things in the U.S. Congress as well.
Yep.
We're cited. We like what it is that we do, and we are proud of what it is that we do. And as I think David told me behind stage, it's like, it's not bragging if it's true. We have done something, and we are very proud of what we've done. It's taken us a long time to get there, though. And
Absolutely.
it's been difficult. It has been difficult. When people talk about, why did it take, Jewel Bank 3 years to get a license? Because tell me where else do you have a company that is licensed by an internationally respected regulator to be able to issue one-to-one stablecoins that can be used? Tell me where else. The fact is that we are pioneering this, but we want to make sure that we get it right because we have a reputation to protect. But now that you've been through this process, we know that it is good, it will work, and that is what we're looking forward to the growth, because our drawback has been banking.
So I think that balance you are playing with, or not playing, but balancing between innovating and attracting innovation with that prudent, pragmatic, regulatory first, and care to obviously your citizens and anyone beyond that. It has been really tough, and I'm glad you're acknowledging that it hasn't been this sort of like unicorns and rainbow 4 years, because you guys have learned a lot from missteps, but you've also learned to be the pioneers that you are, and you can teach others.
Absolutely. And it hasn't been easy. But from that, you remember what it was like in 2018, everything, in 2 years, blockchain's going to change everything, nothing's going to exist, there's going to be no more jobs, all that type of stuff. And sometimes you buy into the hype, but that's why you have to Buidl. You must continue to Buidl, and that's what it is that we're doing here. So now we have as we consider it, one of the final building blocks where we actually have a bank to service digital asset companies, which was something that we did not have. And, we have all those companies that we talked about. None of them have operating bank accounts in Bermuda. They all have operating bank accounts outside because our local banks doesn't have that. Now we have something, and that will certainly even accelerate the growth of what it is that we're doing in Bermuda more.
Well, I'm so excited to hear what you're going to say a year from now, let alone what you're saying right now. But we only have a couple minutes. We're going to wrap up. So if you could have anything, and I mean like literally have anything, all the frictions removed, what would be sort of the thing that you see a year from now happening for Bermuda? If things go right, like all things go right, where are you in a year?
Ooh.
Whoa, someone didn't like what we had to say. What's going on here?
It's like, there's a little power problem. What would I say I want to be in a year? I will give you serious, and then I will give you the joke. The serious aspect is just the continued growth and more Bermudians employed, because I think that's the critical point. I was telling you backstage, I had a conversation with Realm earlier, and in a year, they've tripled the amount of Bermudians that they've had on staff, and they're all Bermudians in our office, 13 people, which is incredible. And for a country as small as ours, that actually does make a difference. So what I want to see, ideally what I'd like to talk about is, we're here today talking about that there's 60 people employed in the digital asset industry. Next year, I want to say that there's going to be double that. Right now, we have 15 companies that are licensed. We had 10 at the beginning of the year. I want to come back and say that, we've doubled that as well. We're trying to go, to exponential growth. On the fun side, what would I like to say and what would be ideal for me? Chances are for you that I can go to Cut Match next year and buy my rum with an app on my phone and pay in a Bermuda dollar stablecoin. Got it? That's what I want, Chance.
Awesome. Marching orders. All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for your time. It's so good to see you. I'm sure you're going to get mobbed by a whole bunch of people here, but really, I hope you and the rest of the team, awesome Bermuda team, enjoy your next few days here.
Okay. Sandra, it's so good to see you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Keep going.